Hello, my name is Brian Kinney and I'm a Striven ERP advisor, and welcome to our company culture lesson where we'll be discussing surveying. Today's topics will include surveys, forms, quizzes, assessments, and link generation. So with that, let's get started. Surveys, forms, quizzes, and assessments are very similar to each other in terms of adding questions, labels, and generating links. So we're going to look at each one by one, but fairly quickly, as not much changes between those particular entities. To find surveys, quizzes, assessments, and forms, however, we can click the Company tab, followed by any of the four options we have underneath the surveying. Let's start with Forms. By clicking Forms, you'll be brought to the Forms list, and here you can search for forms by name and also whether they're active or inactive. To add a new form, click the Add button at the top of the list. Here, you can begin configuring how your form acts, and many of the options we see here you'll find on other things such as surveys, quizzes, and assessments. For instance, one option is whether you want this form to be anonymous, which means it's not going to capture who has taken the form. You can also enable a printable view, and after choosing to enable a printable view, you can store the printable view within the recipient's hub. This means if a customer has filled it out, it'll be stored in the customer's hub. If an employee fills it out, it'll be in the employee's hub. But you don't have to capture either one if you don't want to. You can also choose to note whether you want to hide the question number from the respondent and enable e-sign. If you enable e-sign, you can also track terms and conditions and choose whether or not you capture the respondent's signature. If you choose to capture the respondent's signature, then the signature the respondent has left will be captured with the form and available on the printable format as well. The managers by default are whoever's making or creating the form, but you can add more managers by choosing the field and selecting from your drop-down list. You can also choose who has access to the form, whether it's all employees or selected employees that you select from your employees list. Then just choose the name of your new form and click Next. Once you click Next, you'll have two pages up top. One is the form, named after the form itself, and the other is the thank you page. If you've enabled a printable view of your form, you'll have a third page which will be setting up the printable format for the form. But on the form itself, you can choose to add a label, and this can be something like content, imagery, or simple directions to submit the form. And here you can enter information and conditional format your fonts as well. Options here include the font itself, the size, color, as well as numbering, hyperlinking. You can add images and videos. But here, if we just want to add content for the label and click Save and Close, we'll have a new label added for our form. We can then add a question when we're ready. And you could have any number of question types that appear in the drop-down list here. Question types include multiple choice, single correct answer, and that could be displayed as either a radio button or a drop-down list. You can also have multiple choice, multiple correct answers, a yes or no field. An alphanumeric will allow users to capture alphabetical and numeric data. Numeric data will just be numeric values with a comma added when necessary. You have a date and time, which is a clock option and a calendar option, and then you just have the date option here, which is just the calendar. A matrix will allow you to add rows and columns and be able to choose options from those rows and columns. You have a multi-line text and an editor. Let's choose the matrix and see what we can accomplish using that method. First, let's choose our row choices. Rows will serve as questions, and columns are choices. You can also enter weights to track how responses are captured as scores for the form. If you want to make the question required, you can simply toggle on the checkbox, and here we'll enter our question. Once we choose Save and Close, we'll be able to see our matrix and all the row choices and column choices we've added. And users can fill out the matrix by simply choosing the correct radio button to fit their needs. If you need to add pages, you can click the page and the plus icon to add a new page to the form. And if you would like to manage your pages, you can click the page and gear icon, and here you can rearrange your pages as needed. If you would like to add a page, you can click the Add Page button, And if you'd like to include an intro page, you can toggle on that option, and an introduction page will be added automatically for you. And by choosing Close, we'll be able to configure what our introduction page looks like. If you would like to edit your form more, click the pencil and pad icon to the top, and this will initiate all the same options we had when setting up the form itself. We can also click the page and magnifying glass, which will allow us to preview the form. Here we can see our introduction page, and then the form itself, and we can even see the electronic sign option that users will have when they finish the form. If we want to copy the form, to easily create another, we can click the double page icon to create a copy of the existing form. Let's next explore surveys within our Striven system. To find surveys, click the Company tab and choose Surveys from the drop-down. Here, we'll click the Add button to add a brand new survey. Here you can see we have a lot of the same options that we saw on the form. We have the Anonymous, the Enable Printable View, and Hide Question from Respondent, as well as Enable eSign. This time, we don't have the Add to Recipient Hub, but we do have Show Printable View Before Signing when we enable eSign. And we also have the Terms and Conditions and the Capture Respondent, as well as the Managers and Access To options. By adding the name of our survey, and begin adding the content for our survey. You'll notice that since we enabled a printable view, we have a printable format page, and this will allow us to format what our printable form looks like. Here we can enter merge fields about the survey itself, such as the survey name and recipient information, such as the recipient first, middle, and last name, their address, and much more. If we want to capture the signature, we can choose recipient signature here as well. And any of these options will add merge fields to populate the data automatically for us. Now let's go back to the employee satisfaction page and begin building our survey. Once again, we have the add label function, and we also have the add question. And question types are the exact same that we saw with the form itself. To add a question, simply choose the question type, add in your question, and choose Save and Close. Here you'll be able to see the question populated on the form. Next, we can choose to add another question if we want to, and choose the question type. By clicking Save and Close, we'll be able to see the new question added to the form. When you add a question that has choices, like the yes and no option, you'll have three gears that appear to the far right of the question itself, and this is to configure logic. Logic is a way to hide questions unless a respondent answers the question a certain way. For instance, if I click the logic, I can choose if the answer is no, then I can have them fill out the question, why do you feel this way? And I can add logic and click Close. This will hide the question, why do you feel this way, for any users who answer yes to the first question, but if they answer no, they will have to fill out, why do you feel this way? You also have the same options for the survey that we saw in the form, including copying, previewing, editing, adding a page, and managing your pages as well. Going back to the printable format, we can add the survey information, as well as the question, and whether we want to choose to capture the answer or the checkbox if it's a yes or no. We can enter down and keep adding the questions until we've added everything with the form. It is important to click Save to save all the changes for your printable format. And as we click Preview, we'll be able to see the form, and here you'll see the logic. This question's grayed out because I haven't answered the first question. But if I answer yes, it remains grayed out. If I answer no, then this question becomes available for me to fill out. When I click Next, I'll be able to sign and submit. Now let's look at quizzes. To find quizzes, click Company and Quizzes from the drop-down. Here, we'll be able to add a new quiz by clicking the Add button. Quizzes and assessments are different from surveys and forms, but a lot of the setup is the same. Here, but because they can be scored, you'll now have options for timed, You will now have options for timing and passing scores. Here, let's enter a name for our new quiz. Next, we'll enter our passing score, and here we can configure how this quiz works, whether we want to show the score to the respondent after they have completed the quiz, whether or not we want to enable a printable view, and here you can see that we can choose to store the recipient. And here you can see that we can choose to store the printable view in the recipient hub if we choose. We can also choose to hide the question number from the respondent and choose whether or not we want to make this a timed quiz or not. And here we can enter the duration in which the quiz will last. After the respondent has taken the quiz for the designated time, the quiz will end and the score that they have will remain. To track less than an hour, simply choose 0 hours and however many minutes. And you could do the same for the hours field. If you want to enable eSign, you can capture that, and then you'll have the same options in terms of capturing the respondent's signature and choosing to add terms and conditions. By clicking Next, you'll be brought into the quiz info, and here you'll see a clock with what the duration of the quiz is, along with the passing score at the top. Here we'll have an introduction page in which we can introduce recipients to the quiz. Here we can add information like, once you have your introduction written, it's important to click Save to save those changes. Then you can go to the retention quiz, which is the quiz page itself, and click Add Question. Questions here are a little different from what we saw on the survey and form. Here we can only choose multiple choice single correct answer or multiple choice multiple correct answers. And the final option is yes or no. The thank you page we can configure as well. And finally we have the printable format, which we saw in the other surveying options as well. All of our parent options in terms of copying, previewing, editing, adding pages, and managing pages are all the same as we saw in both the survey and the form. Finally, let's look at assessments. By clicking the Company tab, we can choose Assessments and click the Add button. Here we'll have all the same options that we saw on the quiz, except now we don't have a passing score option, but we can choose a timed assessment, enable eSign, in which we can choose to capture our terms and conditions or the respondent's signature. We can make it anonymous, show the score to the respondent after they finish the assessment, enable a printable view, which will allow us to store in the recipient hub, and hide the number from the respondent as well. Once we're ready, we can click the Next button to go in to manage our assessment. You'll see in the info page we'll also have the duration if we allowed one, with the clock option. We'll have an introduction page just like we saw with the quiz. The candidate assessment or the assessment page will allow us to add questions or labels. And questions for assessments are all the options that we saw with the survey and the form. Here we have a thank you page as well, and the printable format if we've chosen to enable a printable format with our assessment. And all of the parent options, including copying, previewing, editing, managing, and adding pages, are all here. Let's choose to add a question for the assessment, and let's add a yes or no. With the assessment, you have points which you can award, and this will allow you to score the assessment if you so choose. For instance, a yes or no, I can award 0 points for no and 1 point for yes. And then I can mark this question required or make it an unscored question as well. By choosing Save and Close, we'll be able to see the question as well as the points per option that we've selected. If we go to the printable format, we can choose to add our printable format merge fields as we need to, and click Save. With the printable format option, you can click the page and magnifying glass to preview the format, but the merge field will not populate anything because there are no responses to the assessment yet. With either the survey, form, quiz, or assessment, you can choose generate. You can choose the generate button, and this will bring you to the generation page. Here you can choose when the surveying option you've chosen expires, and you can choose a calendar date and a clock icon to choose your expiration date. This means when the expiration date and time arrive, respondents will be told that the link has expired and they will have to generate a new one. You can also choose to relate this option to a customer, candidate, employee, project, or order, and you can select the entity from the drop-down here. You can then choose whether you want to select the employee, customer, order. You can then choose whether you want to You can then select whether you want to choose the entity now, or if you want the recipient to choose the entity. Please note that if you let the recipient choose the entity, they will be able to see whatever list you've included. This could include your customers list, candidates list, employees list, orders list, or projects list. Then you can choose whether or not you want to send an email on completion to an internal user. And if you choose that option, by default it'll be whoever is creating the surveying option you've chosen. But you can't add more than one user here, or deactivate or remove the user selected and choose somebody else. Then you can choose how you want to share your surveying option. You can either choose a public link, which means anybody can fill out the survey, quiz, form, or assessment. Or you can choose an internal link, which means only employees of your Striven system will be able to take the surveying option you've chosen. You also have links over on the far right to share with an employee, customer vendor contact, or candidate. Whichever option you choose, you'll be brought into a new tab where you can select to filter for employees, contacts, or candidates. And here you have all the same functions as we see in areas like the mass email and multi-touch, where you can filter for anything related to the entity. For instance, employees, I can filter by division and choose what division I want to target and click Next. This will find all the employees within that division. When I click Next, I can then view recipients to remove anybody from my target list, and I can also change my search. You'll notice that because we're sharing with individuals, our assessment is automatically entered, and we have merge fields for the assessment name and link to be generated. And here we can send an email to all of those recipients to share the assessment with them to take. Once we're ready, we can choose Generate, and this will populate our link, which we can copy and paste into a URL to take the link. So here, the user can sign their name and click Start. Then, if we've allowed them the choice to select their employee, we can choose the employee from the drop-down and answer our question. Then we can click Submit, and now we'll be able to see our score on the thank you page. To view responses to surveying options, click the Company tab and view whatever option you want to see responses for. In this case, it's an assessment, so we can click the Assessments option. Here we can see the candidate assessment, and we have multiple buttons to manage the assessment as well. The Preview button will allow us to preview how the assessment functions. The Generate assessment will allow us to generate a link, and we'll have all the basic options that we had before. We can also view generated assessments, and this will show us all the links that have been generated in the past. And the last button is View Responses, and this will allow us to see who has taken our assessment. We can see multiple details in terms of who the assessment was related to, the generated date and time, who responded to the assessment, the status, whether it's incomplete or complete, and the score that they achieved. If we click the Details button, we'll be able to see their exact responses, and there's also a button which we can click to show the printable view. You can see here that our merge field for question and answer is working perfectly, and here we can save as a PDF if we want to. If we've related the surveying option, if we've chosen to store the response in the recipient's hub, we can go to whoever responded to the survey's hub. In this case, it's an employee, so we can click the employee and choose list. Then we can search for the employee who responded to the survey, click into their information, and go to the Collaboration tab. Here we can choose assessments since we related an assessment to the employee. And here we can see the assessment, click on the details, and see what the employee filled out when completing the surveying option. And that was a look at how to create and manage surveying options, which include surveys, forms, quizzes, and assessments, and how to generate links and view responses both in the surveying options information and in recipient hubs.